Coming up on We Talk News this week, a Massachusetts dispensary gets robbed at gunpoint, the third for the industry in 4+ years. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland admits his DOJ is still working on reviewing the federal rescheduling of cannabis. TD Bank acquires Cowen Financial and now will stop recommending any cannabis investment. Cresco Labs and Columbia Care delay their highly anticipated merger until the summer. And new owners of a dispensary license want to draw traffic by extending their existing adult entertainment business in order to offer topless bud tenders. Yes, that's true, and it is the 21st century. Why not? Only in America. Only on We Talk News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
So for years, we've been doing manufacturing, financial services, medical, and so forth on businesses that stand alone, from doctors' offices to day traders to even small banks. And so when cannabis came along, all of the tools, skills, and miscellaneous that we learned in there, we were able to apply it for them. And for us, it wasn't that big of a problem or a challenge. It worked great. And so they just needed a reporting feature in one software, and luckily that the software company came through for us, came it back, and now it's become the backbone for our offerings, and it's worked out incredibly well.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of We Talk News. I'm Alaina Pinto. The industry continues to ask, when will the government get around to making changes in the federal cannabis laws? President Joe Biden is the first sitting president to recognize that these laws are archaic and need to be changed. Attorney General Merrick Garland said this week that they are still working on the president's directive. We have a new contributor to We Talk News, Andrew Beringer. He will be keeping an eye on Congress and the Virginia and Maryland cannabis scene.
Thanks, Alani. It's great to be here. Andrew Beringer, covering the D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. And I'm just going to say thanks for having me, and that I hope I'm able to live up to the previous person's position. To start off at the federal levels, Attorney General Merrick Garland came out and said that they are still working on a marijuana policy on the rescheduling of the cannabis plant. He has said that federal health officials are currently taking the lead on a broader ongoing review of cannabis federal scheduling status. Now, I don't know if anyone's aware of what that really means, is that the Biden administration is currently looking at the cannabis plant and rescheduling. Now, I think a big question and topic that we all need to really focus on is the difference between rescheduling the cannabis plant and descheduling the cannabis plant. Two are completely different things and have a great importance. My personal viewpoint is that we need to deschedule or bust, because rescheduling the plant causes a lot more problems down the road, and we can come back to that. Looking at Virginia, Virginia fails to establish a cannabis market for their upcoming deadline of January 1st, 2024. Now, because it is an off year, their legislative session only has a 30-day legislative calendar. And unfortunately, they failed to pass the bill before the start date of, like I said, January 1st, 2024. Unfortunately, this means for Virginia, they are stalled until the next legislative session for next year. Sorry, Virginia. Just to wrap it up, Maryland has two bills on the House and the Senate. They're congruent bills, HB 0556 and SB 0516. They are both identical bills, and they are pushing their way through the legislative session with hearings to try and make the July 1st, 2023 start for their cannabis industry. I am now going to wrap it up, and that is all I have for this and the DMV area. Thanks for having me.
The state of Connecticut has only had adult use sales of cannabis for about 6 weeks, but already That state is averaging $1.5 million in sales a week. Based on the numbers provided by the Department of Consumer Protection, $13.3 million of cannabis was sold during the first 3 weeks in January. And that number includes the $8.2 million on the medical side and the $5.1 million on the adult side. Now, in its 4th year of adult use sales here in Massachusetts, there's another element that has emerged involving public safety, and it's pretty upsetting. PCM founder Jimmy Young has that story.
I'm Jimmy Young, founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and this is the Massachusetts Cannabis Report, supported by Holyoke Cannabis. Now, if you're still wondering why the cannabis industry should have access to banking and charge cards, look no further than what happened at a dispensary in Roslindale, a Boston neighborhood, this week. High-profile ex-bodega, a dispensary on Washington Street, was held up on Sunday night, February 26, by 3 masked men with guns just after 7 p.m. Now, the robbers got away with close to $50,000 in cash, and while no one was hurt, the dispensary did close for a day. Another example of why the Safe Banking Initiative in Washington, D.C. really is a public safety issue. The town of Whately, Massachusetts has 1,700 residents and still has been home to the Club Castaway for years. That adult entertainment club was closed in March of 2020 when the pandemic began. Now new ownership is looking to open with no alcohol or dancing, but they are looking to be a cannabis licensed dispensary. There has been already a little pushback from some of the residents, while others are encouraging the idea of topless bud tenders. I guess anything goes when you need to drive traffic into a dispensary. Now, speaking of traffic and not entertainment or adult entertainment, Pro Cannabis Media held its first networking event at the Summit Lounge in Worcester, Massachusetts this week. People from all over New England showed up to hear the Double Shot Band play, and yours truly interview cannabis industry supporters like Triton Technologies CEO Trav Harmon.
I'm trying to advocate, and right now I'm trying to
Educate,
advocate, and a lot of people, like in my town, I live in Plainfield, they were always like, well, we're only going to get a small amount of taxes. You don't understand. All the ancillary, you're going to have electricians and plumbers, you're going to have construction people, delivery people, you're going to have all these secondary that do not touch the product, that will have jobs. In production, I have yet to meet a production facility that doesn't have full on-time, on-staff plant managers, electricians, plumbers, because there's a lot of work. So even if you're not touching it, you're not selling it, it's all the secondary market, all those taxes. Great. All of a sudden, that person that now has a great manufacturing job, that money can now go to their kids' sports. They can go out to eat. It's going to the restaurants. It's going to Cub Scouts. It's going to all those things.
I even got up to sing one of my favorite songs by Jonathan Edwards, and the industry, yes, is still buzzing about this event. Gonna sit around in the kitchen, putting something good to eat, make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. We are planning on doing a handful more of these types of events at the Summit Lounge over the next few months. It is the state's only private cannabis consumption lounge. That's the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for this week, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News. Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
The trend of Republican-led initiatives for cannabis reform at the state level continues. In North Carolina, Republican Senator Bill Rabon introduced legislation that would create a medical cannabis program in that state. Historically, North Carolina has some of the harshest penalties for possession in the country. And the state Senate there did pass Senator Rabon's bill by a 36-10 vote. But adult use reform for so-called recreational purposes is not on the table and probably won't for a while. No such problem in Michigan, though. Normal executive director for that state is Rick Thompson, and he tells us that some minority owned entrepreneurs are being praised in the media.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. The Detroit Free Press recently acknowledged 7 Black-owned cannabis companies as part of their celebration of Black History Month, which is also always February. They include Copper House of Detroit, Primitive, the cannabis line from Rob Sims and Calvin Johnson, Q Culture, which is Anquinette Sarfo's company, The Lovely Ladies Who Trim, BLK Sapote, an infused tea company, Collexium with Rebecca Collette, and Lucky Pistol Catering, which is Chef Enid Parnham's company. I've had their food, and trust me, it is excellent. The story was published February 25th and is available for reading at this time. Arts, Beats, and Eats will allow cannabis sales and consumption during their 2023 event, according to organizers. This is a huge mega party, which happens every year during Labor Day weekend. Last year, the powers that be seriously considered offering a cannabis tent to the notorious booze circus, but eventually said no. This year, the fest will feature a House of Dank tent where cannabis will be sold and a private consumption tent will be available. House of Dank has sponsored Arts, Beats, and Eats since 2021, even though they couldn't sell or display any cannabis products. The Royal Oak City Council said, this is a trial run, and if things don't go smoothly, it'll be a one and done project. Well, potentially hundreds of cannabis retailers were without the use of their Metric software systems on Wednesday. Metric is the state's seed to sale tracking software and the state's sales counter and inventory tracking program. Metric charges each user $40 a month, and if you haven't paid that fee for 3 months or more, they will shut you off from the service. The Cannabis Regulatory Agency issued a bulletin claiming up to 85% of all Michigan retailers are behind on their payments and might be affected. A notice sent out by the Cannabis Legal Group states this could be as many as 200 cannabis retailers across the state. Well, let's not talk falsely now. This isn't because Michigan companies are broke or they're just too lazy to pay their bills. In a blog post from Dykema, 2 attorneys explained that Metric does not issue invoices for this fee. Social media commentators claim there's some sort of tab on the Metric interface that would allow you to pay that bill right up front. But if 85% of the users in Michigan don't know how to do this, then there is a serious communication gap being revealed here. Now, based on a negotiation with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, Metric officials have given an additional 30-day time frame for all Michigan operators to restore their accounts into good standing. And speaking of financial things, $59.5 million will be dispersed from the state of Michigan to cities, villages, counties, and townships, which allow cannabis retailers and micro businesses to operate. Now, that's the local community's cut of the 10% excise tax charged on adult use cannabis flower in Michigan. 160 municipalities and 64 counties will share in the bounty. Each retail store or micro operating between October 1, 2021 and September 30, 2022 will bring $51,841.21 back home to mama. This figure is slightly smaller than last year's municipal payout because there's a greater number of retailers to divide the tax among. There were only 274 retailers in 2021 and 574 retailers in fiscal 2022, according to MLive's Gus Burns. The state currently has 632 active retail licenses, and that's expected to increase as Detroit processes more applications for retailers. Total tax collected in fiscal 2022 did increase by more than $17 million. Now, here's the great thing. You should know that only 30% of the excise tax collected goes to cities and counties, 35% goes to the Michigan Transportation Fund, 35% to the School Aid Fund for K-12 education. Each of those 2 funds gets $69.4 million from the disbursement. Cannabis dollars in action, making a difference for kids, for communities, and for safe roadways. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Overseas in Europe, that continent is fast becoming a battleground for many reform initiatives. Even in Israel, the newly instated government there is looking into putting that industry under the direction of the National Health Insurance Plan. If that happens, the number of medical cannabis patients in Israel could double. For the rest of the cannabis news from Europe, here is Lex Pelger.
I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. This week, we see various stages of cannabis coming out of the dark and into the light. First, in Italy, a court has overturned a decree against using the whole hemp plant. Previously, a decree limited hemp production to seeds and fiber. In this legal case, brought by cannabis associations, the court agreed that you could not limit the uses of a plant to only certain parts without a safety justification. And since the European Commission has stressed that CBD is not a narcotic and should be allowed to circulate freely through the member states, the court ruled to allow the whole use of the plant, opening up Italian markets to CBD and hemp flower once more. In the Netherlands, although the country is known as a cannabis safe haven, the cultivation of the plant is still illegal. Called the backdoor problem, the country plans to begin a pilot program by the end of this year to allow for 3 cannabis growers to supply legal cannabis to the coffee shops for 6 months. The products sold under the pilot program will comply with the government's quality, labeling, and packaging requirements, but there will be no limits on THC concentration. Although the plan was approved in 2019, it was hindered by logistical difficulties, including access to banking. Speaking of, in Malta, the Home Affairs Ministry is in talks with an unnamed major bank about providing banking services to the country's nascent nonprofit cannabis associations. Access to banking is a constant problem across the world for any organization working with cannabis. Malta's proactive steps on this issue will only help these nonprofit clubs as they launch. And finally, in Spain, their Congress is debating a law for both the therapeutic and recreational use of cannabis. This would allow cannabis to be smoked anywhere that tobacco is allowed and would also open up access to medical cannabis with a prescription. The proposal specifies that the only source of cannabis will be homegrown or nonprofit cannabis associations. However, 3 similar laws have been introduced in the last 2 years, and all of them were knocked down after strong opposition from some of the majority groups. All of this debate is a bit odd considering that Spain is the home of the most widespread network of quasi-legal cannabis consumption clubs in all of Europe. But the hopes of the pro-cannabis Spanish groups is to make it easier for patients to access clean, safe medicine and to legitimize the public consumption of cannabis for everyone else. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
That big merger between Cresco Labs and Columbia Care has been delayed until the second quarter of 2023. The $2 billion merger between the Chicago, Illinois-based Cresco Labs and New York-based Columbia Care is delayed for some of the investment principals to divest from other companies before they close on this huge merger. The deal is not reported to be in jeopardy, but the close is now targeted for June. On top of that, TD Bank has acquired one of the first financial institutions to get into and support the cannabis business. It's the Cohen Financial Group, who will now stop recommending to invest in the industry. TD Bank did say if the federal government creates a legal industry, they will be happy to endorse it. Now it's time to get high on Wall Street with Doug Miller. He has this week's stock market report for the cannabis industry.
Hello everyone, I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Cresco Labs, stock ticker CRLBF. They acquired Columbia Care, stock ticker CCHWF, but they had to file an extension. It was supposed to go through March 31st, but they got an extension to June 30th. He put $185 million in the Cresco Labs. He's actually going to own the New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts entities. So let's look at the stock chart. Cresco Labs, CRLBF. It's down at the bottom right now. It looks like it can go either way, to be honest. I'm just keeping my eye on it. It could curl up. It looks much better than Columbia Care. So you're going to have to just keep your eye on these two and see what's going on for the acquisition. And then probably it'll get moving in one way or the other as it gets closer to that June 30th. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Doug Miller.
Okay, now let's turn to the Midwest, where Oklahoma has awarded more legal licenses than any other state other than California. In fact, there have been over 2,300 medical licenses awarded in Oklahoma, and now advocates in that state are preparing for a ballot question on adult use legislation next month. Sure enough, there are still some concerns in that state among the two biggest advocacy groups, Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action and the Oklahomans for Sensible Marijuana Laws group. The biggest dispute in that state and many new states is what to do with outside the state operatives. There we go. Not far from Oklahoma is Missouri, and that's where Brandon Jones keeps his eye on what is going on there. And he is focused on a march for legalization in the neighboring state of Kansas.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Big Green Distribution with this week's Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, here in Missouri, we do not allow people that are not living in the state of Missouri to have a license, but obviously, just like many of the other states, all the MSOs are finding loopholes or people that want to invest in their company and then be a part because they live in the state. Oklahoma was kind of the Wild West. They opened up the licensures for such a low price and didn't put a cap. So there was a lot more people getting licensed than actually should have and know what to do with them. So a big process that we're trying to get, taken care of here in Missouri is that there weren't too many licenses given out so that the supply and the demand, kind of match. And then that keeps with the quality of the product as well. If you go to Oklahoma, a lot of the people that got the license have no business having a license to know how to grow cannabis. And if you try it down there, you'll find out real quick. I'll be there for the Oklahoma Canna Cup next month. But I'm not excited to taste most of the flower there in Oklahoma. But this week here going on in Kansas City, there is a big event that we talked about, the march here in March for March in Kansas City. It's at the Our House location on State Line. And what that event is really focused on is bringing awareness to Kansas legislators to say, hey, just a simple street defines whether you're a patient or a criminal. So everybody is going to be wearing an orange shirt on the Kansas side of State Line, which is only 22 feet, which also is ironically the number of veterans that commit suicide every single day. So we will have veterans in uniform on the side as well to represent those people and those that have sacrificed and provided service to our country. Then on the Missouri side, everybody will be wearing a green shirt. So you'll have orange on one side of the street. Everybody in green on the other will have aerial and drone footage to kind of just put some more visuals to this to show, hey, it's only 22 feet between whether you're a patient or a criminal. This is just kind of the beginning of a lot of events that are getting ready to happen here in Missouri. If we know Lucky Leaf is coming here this month, we have a lot of fun coming up in April with the Canna Fest and the West Bottoms live event. It's really cool, open to the public, outdoor consumption is allowed there. Last year, the Representative Ron Hicks and a lot of the people on the legislation here in Missouri and in Kansas came to the event. Mayor Lucas, Quentin Lucas, is a full supporter of allowing the event, and it is decriminalized for cannabis use in the city of Missouri, or the city of Kansas City itself. Then obviously 420 is huge with Wiz Khalifa here. So a lot of things are pumping up here in Kansas City and in the Missouri market. So excited again for all this here to come and seeing more people having access to the plant. So again, I'm Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution. Everybody stay educated and medicated. Have a great week.
New York isn't the only state dealing with an excess of state-grown cannabis. Oregon has long been producing more product than the demand in that state. And now they are implementing new testing laws in the state. Marianne Kursaji has our Oregon report.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Last week, we reported on a push from Oregon's legislature to increase cannabis sales taxes. The industry banded together and effectively shut down that measure. It may pop up again this session, but hopefully the legislators heard the message of no new taxes. And another follow-up from last week, a double homicide in Texas of two men with ties to the Oregon cannabis industry led to an illicit growing facility in Oregon. The unlicensed grow in Jacksonville, Oregon, was raided this week. And finally, Oregon's new testing rules became effective March 1st. The new rules include testing for microbiological and heavy metal contaminants. Many producers are worried about heavy metal contaminants because a lot of organic inputs contain heavy metals. There is no remediation allowed for products that have failed heavy metal testing. Of course, consumer safety is paramount, and it would be great to have a scientific understanding of how and if heavy metals are transferred from soils and nutrients into finished products. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
And finally tonight, say it ain't so. Woody Harrelson. Yes, one of Hollywood's biggest proponents of cannabis use. The 61-year-old Harrelson has 38 years of experience in an Emmy award-winning career, right? And in an interview this past week on CBS Sunday Morning News, he said he has moved on from the plant after coming out of the cannabis closet 25 years ago. He explained the pushback he received when he started to advocate for his own use has become unbearable. Now, Harrelson is going sober, despite being a dispensary owner in West Hollywood. So there you go. That's it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Alaina Pinto, and make sure you like and share and subscribe to all of the pro-cannabis media content. And of course, remember, it is a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. See you next time. Okay,
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weedgets filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission and the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.